While the Soviet Union fell under the grip of a repressive communist regime, other nations on the European continent were also sliding into authoritarian rule during the 1920s and 1930s. Benito Mussolini, an Italian fascist, came to office in 1925. Mussolini would find an ally in the person of Adolf Hitler, an Austrian former art student who would rise to power in Germany. The social and economic ruin of Germany made it vulnerable to extremist politics. Lack of freedom and democracy were the common denominators in both communist and fascist systems of government. The election of Hitler as German Chancellor in 1933 would change the course of European history as expansionist policies sparked the flames of another worldwide conflict. During the early 1920s, Italy was full of political turmoil. Socialist parties instigated workers' strikes in the northern industrial cities, while right-leaning fascist factions emerged as powerful forces. Fascism is defined as political and economic ideology that focuses on the importance of a powerful, centralized authority. A fascist government controls all aspects of information, education, and media. In the 1921 Italian election, fascist candidates succeeded in winning 35 seats in the country's parliament. By October of 1922, Benito Mussolini, a prominent fascist parliamentarian, was threatening a coup d'etat, a hostile takeover of the existing government. Mussolini began as a socialist and later adopted fascist leanings. Mussolini expressed his views on governance as the editor of a newspaper called Il Popolo in 1919. In Il Popolo, he explicitly outlined the platform of his Fascio Italiano di Combattimento, which would become the Italian Fascist Party. He wrote extensively about his ideal form of fascist government. Mussolini believed in a strong leader presiding over a powerful military with individuals subservient to the state. Mussolini believed that a fascist political system would provide stability and organization for Italy and restore the country's greatness as a European power. Mussolini was supported by his fascist faction, the Fasci di Combattimento. The Fasci di Combattimento was made up primarily of ex-soldiers loyal to Mussolini's cause. They became known to Italians as the Black Shirts because of their attire of choice. 25,000 black shirts marched on the Italian capital of Rome after Mussolini's coup d'etat threat. This march prompted Italy's King Victor Emmanuel III to invite Mussolini to join a coalition government with the country's Prime Minister, Giovanni Giolitti. King Victor Emmanuel III held ceremonial rather than actual power. Giolitti was old, ill, and not able to oppose Mussolini's ascent to power. By 1925, Mussolini and his supporters succeeded in taking control of parliament. The fascist Black Shirts killed one of Mussolini's key opponents, a socialist parliamentarian named Giacomo Matteotti. The king appointed Mussolini prime minister, believing he could put an end to the instability. Once Mussolini's power base was secure, he requested dictatorial powers for 1 year from the parliament. His request was granted, and Mussolini dubbed himself Il Duce, Italian for the leader. Between 1925 and 1931, Mussolini clamped down on opposition. Independent trade unions and political parties were abolished, while freedom of the press was restricted. A national police force called the OVRA was created in 1927, headed by Arturo Bocchini. The Black Shirts remained a de facto state police organization, using mob violence to silence any opponents of the fascist government. Those who openly denounced the Italian fascists were tried in special courts set up specifically to prosecute political dissidents. Mussolini believed that it was necessary to merge corporate and government power. The 1929 National Council of Corporations was created to give the government oversight over Italy's major industries and ensure that agricultural and industrial output remained high. Mussolini's government had to negotiate with the Roman Catholic Church, which was a powerful force in Italian society. The 1929 Lateran Accords was an agreement between the fascist government and the Roman Catholic Church that granted the church continued status as the state religion. Jewish Italians suffered from persecution and exclusion at the hands of the fascist government. The 1938 legislation known as the Manifesto della Razza, or the Manifesto of the Race, meant Italian Jews could not serve as government officials or members of the military. Italian schoolchildren under Mussolini were taught that he was the only leader who could make the nation great. School-sponsored youth brigades for boys were established to teach young Italian men that military service was their highest civic goal. Mussolini's family policy favored a high birth rate, and women were discouraged from participating in the paid workforce. Propaganda campaigns extolled the virtues of large families. Childless couples and single adults were taxed extra in a campaign called the Battle of the Births. Mussolini's foreign policy goals included expansion and colonization. Rhetoric and imagery involving the ancient Roman Empire was a consistent theme. In 1923, the first attempt at expansion was undertaken. Italian forces invaded and occupied Corfu, an island off the western coast of Greece, as the League of Nations sat by powerless to stop it. Mussolini's government tightened control over the existing Italian colony of Libya in North Africa, appointing General Rodolfo Graziani to crush any dissident. In 1935, Mussolini invaded the East African nation of Abyssinia, a country that had long stood proud of its independence from European colonial control. Abyssinia, which later known as Ethiopia, was defended before the League of Nations by its emperor, Haile Selassie. Emperor Selassie's pleas fell on deaf ears, and Mussolini's forces continued to occupy Abyssinia as well as neighboring Somaliland on the East African coast. By 1939, Mussolini ruled Italy with an iron fist and had extended Italian control beyond the nation's borders. After Kaiser Wilhelm II's abdication in 1919 and the rise of the Social Democrat Party, Germany maintained a fragile democracy during the 1920s. The German parliament was called the Reichstag, and Germany's democracy was referred to as the Weimar Republic. The leader of the Reichstag was known as the Chancellor and was the leader of the political party in the parliament that had the most seats. The German Weimar Republic was weak and impoverished, leaving a power vacuum in which fascism became a growing ideology. One political party in Germany was the German Workers' Party. In 1920, an Austrian former art student named Adolf Hitler joined the party and rose through its ranks over the next 3 years. Hitler was a veteran of the Great War who changed his party's name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as the Nazi Party for short. In reorganizing the Nazi Party, Hitler created an elite corps of combatants known as the Brown Shirts, who would act as the party's militant wing. As the Nazi Party gained popularity, Hitler gained fame by traveling from city to city, making political speeches. In 1923, Hitler and his supporters staged a demonstration in the southern German city of Munich in an attempt to take over the city hall. This stunt became known as the Beer Hall Putsch, because the members of the Nazi Party who instigated the riot began their march in a local beer hall. The Beer Hall Putsch landed Hitler in prison, where he authored a treatise called Mein Kampf, or German for The Struggle. Mein Kampf outlined Hitler's political beliefs and his goals for the Nazis as Germany's future leaders. Hitler believed that German-speaking people comprised a master race known as the Aryans, and that Jews, Slavs, and Africans were inferior and ought to be subjugated. In Mein Kampf, he also argued that Germans, due to their superiority, should reclaim lands in Central Europe, an expansionist ideology known in German as Lebensraum. In keeping with fascist ideologies outlined by Mussolini, Hitler believed in a powerful central government. This would be followed by the bolstering of the military, the promotion of ultranationalism, and the limitation of individual rights. Hitler opposed communism, which gained him support from the more affluent sectors of German society. Poverty and hyperinflation aided Hitler's rise in popularity, as did his proclamation that Germany should stop paying reparations to Britain and France. Weimar Germany's 1930 and 1932 parliamentary elections saw the Nazi Party gain a majority of seats. Hitler butted heads with Germany's President Paul von Hindenburg, who relented and allowed him to take up the position of Chancellor. In February of 1933, Hitler called a special election that would expand his power and used his brown shirts to intimidate opponents. With his position secure, Hitler used an incident of a fire at the Reichstag to urge the passage of laws that would grant him emergency powers. In 1933, the passage of the Enabling Acts granted Hitler the ability to authorize new laws without a majority vote from Parliament. This gave him a license to suspend civil liberties and outlaw other political parties. Hindenburg's death the following year made Hitler both Chancellor and President. To enforce his power, Hitler created a paramilitary force called the Schutzstaffel, or SS. The infamous Nuremberg laws enacted between 1933 and 1938 stripped Germany's Jewish citizens of their rights and limited the jobs they could do. Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, was one notorious incident. On the night of November 9, 1938, Nazis looted Jewish homes, schools, and businesses, leading to over 100 deaths. Hitler took control of Germany's media and relied on his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, to make sure all media outlets reported in favor of the Nazi Party. Hitler strived to instill nationalist values in Germany's children, boosted stipends for families with many children, and stimulated Germany's economic growth. Fascist political theory, defined and practiced by Mussolini and Hitler, emphasized all of the following except A, strong military, B, use of secret police, C, emphasis on nationalism, D, freedom of the press, E, territorial expansion. The answer is D, freedom of the press.